IAB There. And now,
hi, everybody. Welcome to IAB There, our regular streaming show where we connect the digital advertising ecosystem. My name is Brad Behrens. I am the editor-in-chief here at IAB. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we have the third in a series of episodes of IAB There that are celebrating the Interactive Advertising Bureau's 25th anniversary. 1996 was the year that IAB was founded. We are now at 2021. It's an exciting time. The digital marketing ecosystem has come an extraordinary way in just a quarter century. We're going to be looking back at the history of the IAB and then also forward towards the end and where we think things will be in another 25 years. We started with an interview with Rich Lafergie. Rich and I then later did a subsequent conversation with Wenda Harris-Millard. Today, Rich Lafergie, who is my co-host, will be joining me again with Kate Thorpe. She is the president and CEO of KKT Consulting and Advisory. She was there at the beginning and making a lot of important decisions. It's important to know your history so that you don't repeat it, or at least so that you don't repeat the bad parts and that you continue to dig in on the good parts. We'll be talking about the first year, but we'll also be talking about how the work of the first year changed things in year two for the IAB, which was 1997. So let's bring Rich and Kate into the stream. Rich Lafergie, welcome back to IAB There. Kate Thorpe, welcome to IAB There.
Hey, Brad. Great to see you both.
Well, Kate, let's talk about your career before you joined the interactive industry. You've had quite a career. What were you doing right before you came into this industry? And then tell us about the first couple of years before 1996, when the meeting, which we'll talk about, took place.
Well, I started my professional career as a journalist, actually. So I was doing TV news in Maryland. And then I did a stint for the US Congress as a congressional aide before finding my true love in advertising and moving to the Bay Area. So I was working in media at J. Walter Thompson, Jenny Craig, I think was my first account. And I was also at Ketchum on Bank of America before going back to J. Walter on Sprint. And that's how I met Halsey and Shelby and CNET. And I soon went to CNET and became their first online crusader.
Online crusader. That sounds like a great title. Tell me more.
Well, it was. And actually, it was a wonderful position. So I worked directly for Halsey to help create the industry and education about what online advertising could be, and to go to the agencies and the creatives and put meaning behind what advertising online was and could be for the brands that they represented.
So, Rich, for people who don't know, will you explain who Halsey was?
Well, Halsey is the founder of CNET, Halsey Minor, and he's a real great entrepreneur. And also Shelby Bonney, who ended up being our first outside chairman, who really helped the IAB through the early years when we had some financial issues during the downturn. There's a lot of CNET DNA in the IAB.
So, and then Kate, let's just skip ahead to the sort of a little bit later, because when I met you you had founded Lot 21, and then that had been acquired by Kara. So tell us about sort of what's the trajectory in the years sort of from 98 to 2005 or so.
Sure. So after being at CNET for 3 years, talking to agencies about doing great work online, I felt like, well, maybe I should do this too. And so I founded Lot 21. And in fact, Rich was our first outside board member. And he moved from Seattle, right, to San Francisco. And that kicked off a whole nother world for him. But yeah, so we did Lot 21 from till 2002. right? 98 to 2002, and we sold that to Kara. And then I did a stint as president of AKQA, and then I founded Real Girls Media and got back with Rich again when he was on the VC side that also, funded us. And then I introduced Rich to the VC. And so then he ended up becoming a partner and one of our board members. And let's see, after Real Girls, I've done consumer brands like Beauty Noted. I was most recently at Molecule in consumer electronics and direct to consumer. And now I'm doing some consulting in fintech.
Fantastic. And we'll probably put you to work for our Brand Disruption Summit, which is all about D2Cs and where your experience is going to be worthwhile. So let's go back to, and Rich, actually, let's pull up that first slide. Let's talk about the first year and then talk about that first meeting. We've talked about it before, but I want to get Kate's perspective. But for what we're looking at here is a timeline of IAB year one. So Rich, take us through what the biggest parts of this were.
So the things to focus on below the months are the organizational meeting, which we had at CNET, and we had a handful of people, and Kate can take us through kind of how the DNA of that meeting. Then we had an administrative meeting where we had 35 companies show up, and we started talking about our committees. Then we had a general meeting in New York in June, and we had 10 committees figured out at that point. And then at the very bottom, we had a general meeting in New York. And really the highlights from that initial organizational meeting in San Francisco at CNET was we changed the name from Internet Advertising Council, and we came up with the name of the Internet Advertising Bureau, and we had this incredibly beautiful logo down there. That's what happens when you get free pro bono graphics, and Randy Rothenberg did a fantastic job of rehabilitating our logo with IAB dot, with that dot at the end. And we really hit our stride in the summer when we were incorporated, we had our bylaws, we started our revenue reporting beta in the summer, but it really all kind of came together in the fall when we did in November, December, when we had our banner guidelines that we talked about in our first podcast.
Yep.
We had our revenue reporting results. We had case histories. And it was a very big year. We saw that there was a $30 million in revenue in the first quarter of 96. It grew to 276 million by the end of the year. So we were able to chart the growth over those different quarters. It was a very important year for us at that first year.
So Kate, since the first meeting happened at the CNET offices and you were the digital crusader, talk about that first meeting. And also you got some angry phone calls. So tell us about that.
Well, all good intentions, but there was some frustration in those initial calls. Well, it came from an article that Tim Clark wrote. And he and Halsey had a prior conversation about a call to arms to try and create a trade group. And so we didn't want any one company to be the one inviting people and doing things like that. So Tim Clark wrote this great article. And in fact, Steve Goldberg read it and called Halsey. And then Halsey said, yep, talk to Kate. We're going to try and put some group of people together. By the way, she'll be at the Jupiter conference, touch base with her. And so out of that next meeting at the Jupiter conference, and Steve approached me, the connector that he is. He had Richie, Leslie Laredo, a whole slew of people. And I think it was his birthday. So I think he made a party of it as well. And really pulled all these people together. So we had the West Coast connections that I had. We had all of Steve's, which were more than New York, brought together. And we hosted a meeting. And those funny, the phone calls and emails were basically folks thinking that we had looked them over and created this meeting without them. So, we unruffled a few feathers and let them know that we not only wanted them, we wanted anybody else that they thought that should be there. And I just kept sending the list of people who said they were coming to everybody and saying, if they're not on here, if anybody else. And so by the time we got to the meeting, everybody was, in good form and really energized. And I think, Rich, you can speak to this. It was crazy. We left that first meeting with charging orders. We were ready to go. There was a steering committee and there was a next meeting and a next meeting set. It was, all within those first few months.
Yeah, the meeting was incredibly productive. We had so many different people representing so many different parts of the business, and we really focused in on publishers, increasing the revenue for the entire industry. We always used to say a rising tide lifts all boats. Another thing that we like to say was check your ego at the door. Everybody did that to a person, and it continued for years and years and years. And it's part of the DNA for the IAB that I think has really served us well. So we started that organizational meeting, and it was incredibly productive, and it allowed us to catapult into the administrative meeting and then the general meeting. And along the way, we just got more and more people involved.
And you said that people check their egos at the door. These are, I think it's worth talking about. These are fierce competitors who are nonetheless trying to figure out where they're all solving. And this is something you've said, Rich, solving the same problems. Kate, you've said famously that click data was the media buyer's heroin. Can you unpack that? And what was did people were people's eyes surprised the first time you said that? Like, where did that come from, and why was it important in '96?
Yeah, well, I'm coming out of media, right, and then working directly at CNET to provide real-time reporting. So CNET was one of the first publishers that actually gave you daily reporting. I think we might have regretted that in the first month because you can never take it back, and that it was very heavy lifting. But nonetheless, when you provide data to media planners and buyers that haven't had it, before, right? We're always taking third-party data, and projecting it across who might have seen it, what they might have done with it, anecdotally, to handing you data that's like this many people took an action on your creative, right, and your message. We couldn't get past it then, right? And so it was really important to have, well, what did your image convey? What impact did that have? And so not just the click, because that wasn't the only value. And so that in the IAB as well, we did the brand study, so that we could show what value was also created with all the impressions that were being had.
Which is it's so funny to hear about this now that we have so much data, and there's the third party identifiers are going away, and this is all the overture to things that are now actively changing in real time under our feet. Let's talk about year two. It's launching things is hard enough. But sometimes going back for the second year is even harder. So let me frame the question and then ask Rich to walk us through year two. But the question on my mind is, how did the work of year one change each of your jobs and change the industry in year two? But Rich, before you to answer that question, walk us through some of the highlights of '97. And I believe the international org meeting was somewhat infamous. So talk us through what happened in year two, and then let's talk about how year one changed year two for both of you.
So we really started to get some momentum in '97 after the banner guidelines and the online revenue report, which we released in March. And that again showed that 267 million had been spent in that first year. What's really important is the annual report in '97, because we really came into our own in 1997. We were at a over $1 billion run rate based on Q4 revenue. We started to see seasonality from the revenue report. We were growing faster In year 3, then television grew in its initial years on a dollar adjusted basis. So this is when we really started to come of age. Kate was leading the charge on measurement guidelines because she was the most technical of the group, coming from CNET, which was a really important thing where we coalesced the agency on what sort of measurement we needed. Kate referenced the effectiveness study, which happened in September, the brand lift effectiveness study that we did with Rex Briggs. I will tell you, people were very interested in click-throughs, like Kate said, and the effectiveness study about the brand impact of advertising online kind of was met with a lot of, don't want to say disinterest, but nobody really cared. Everybody was really focused on click-throughs. And we have been pulling ourselves out of click-throughs over the years. It's still a metric, but we know that there's a lot more things like conversions, et cetera, that's important. The international organizational meeting will live in infamy. Richie Glassberg and I, who was at Turner, we flew to London. We had prepped the meeting. We had talked to international people that were interested in getting an IAB started in Europe. And we showed up, and we thought we had everybody, interested and teed up. And we got to the front of the meeting room, and we were basically shouted down by different countries by saying, "How dare the Americans think that they could come in and kind of push our point of view of the world on them?" And we weren't doing anything of the sort. We were just trying to get them organized. Now, we do have, I think it's like 45 different IABs around the country. And it's grown dramatically. And I would just say that, in 98 was a really big year where we had 1.9 billion. And we grew from 175 IAB members in 1997 to 650 members today. And so we've really grown dramatically. Those first 2 years were the context and kind of catapulted us into what the IAB has grown to today.
So Kate, let's turn to you. You were the digital crusader, you were an evangelist. So suddenly in 97, you have the first year, and then you're leading the measurement committee. How did it change your job? How did it make things easier, better, different day to day when you weren't working for IAB? Because you had a day job.
Well, I think so the first year, as Rich said, was very organizational, but those foundations that we created then gave comparison and benchmarks to year 2. And so being able to show a growth rate was incredible, because people were like, wow, this is for real, and it's not a flash in the pan. It's not just a small banner. It's really affecting our marketing. And these guys aren't going away, right? And then getting measurement done really gave us a foundation again to buy and sell the media. And it, led into TNCs and everything else, and collaboration with partners at the 4As and the AMA, and getting, regular buying cycles, right? So as far as the job changing in year 2, I think our entire sales group, was had far less friction, right, in the buy. There were standard agreements that they could use. It wasn't every buy was different, every sale was different, every client was different. Instead, that it was coalescing to having some standards so people could do their jobs and be effective. And as Rich just articulated, that just catapulted the revenue year after year and quarter after quarter.
So Rich, you were selling at Starwave. Anything to add to what Kate just told us?
Yeah, I think the one of the reasons we did the revenue report was to show that the revenue was real. In those early days, Netscape and AOL did a bunch of really big marquee deals, and nobody believed that there was actually any money changing hands. So we did the revenue report to say, hey, this is real money. And then we were able to show that it grew. In the first 6 months of my joining Starwave in the summer of '95, I couldn't get arrested in selling anything. I mean, I'd go to agency after agency. I'd fly from Seattle to New York. Everybody would take the meeting, and I'd take the meeting and I wouldn't necessarily get to exactly the right people because agencies weren't set up for interactive at that point. We had like special people that I could talk to versus the general buyers. And so that year really kind of set us up in 97 to be a real medium. We had standards, we had banner standards, we had T's and C's. We had all the different pieces that we needed to actually make deals. And so the friction went way, way down. And along the way, we were still collaborating. And the one thing I'll tell you is that every time we had a general meeting, we'd always have a dinner. And it was like a therapy session where we would all get together and talk about our battles and everything that we had learned. And it's a very collaborative industry still to this day. And it started way back then.
And if you think about the extent to which today talking about digital marketing is kind of like talking about color television. What part of marketing isn't digital today? Whereas 25 years ago, that was very, very far from the case. Kate, last question to you. Let's look forward to 2046, which will be when IAB celebrates its 50th anniversary. So what do you think might still be the same as it was in 96 and today and 25 years from now? And then what do you hope will be different?
Well, I think just as was true in 1996 and now, I would hope that the IAB will continue to empower the industry with collective insights through measurement and research like the revenue report, and always developing media properties that require understanding and standards of their own to continue the rapid pace of development. I really believe if we maintain this attitude and work on behalf of the industry, the IAB will continue to be indispensable and really more important many, many decades to come.
Well, I think that's a fabulous place to end. Let me thank Rich Lafergie, founding chairman of the IAB and director of the 4A's Institute for Advanced Advertising, and Kate Thorpe, president and CEO of KKT Consulting and Advisory, for joining us on this as our continuing oral history of the IAB at 25. Thank you both for coming. A quick PSA, we have a brand salon on June 10th from 2 to 3:15 p.m. Eastern. It is open to all brands. It is about Gen Z. We'll have a presentation from the Pew Research Center. We'll have a presentation from Twitch and one from Snap. In order to join, please send an email to andy@iab.com. This is open to all brands. Thank you for joining us at IAB There. IAB There is a production of the Interactive Advertising Bureau. Our show today was produced by Connor Healy, James Linney, Joe Pilla, and Loretta Bain. I'm Brad Behrens, editor-in-chief here at the IAB. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.